5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is Deducter bringing you Set 5 of SKT versus Hwaseung Oz. We have what is surely the matchup of the entire series, Jaedong versus Fantasy. These two are incredible, have incredible rivalry. There we see Fantasy as the Yellow Terran at the 11 o'clock position, whereas Jaedong is the Brown Zerg at the 7 o'clock position. This is the map Beltway. These two players have an incredible history together. Jaedong vs. Flash is the greatest rivalry of our time, but Fantasy vs. Jaedong surely has coming at a close second. These two players have exchanged blows in the past, most notably Jaedong versus SKT versus Hwaseung Oz in the Pro League Finals 2 years ago. Grand Finals, there was an ace match and then a super ace match, which Fantasy won both games against Jaedong, including one that was a bunker rush channeling the spirit of Boxer, and then they met in a best of 5 in the OSL semifinals, where the first game Jaedong lost after a grueling match, but then Jaedong, seemingly defeated, seemingly out of it, came back with a ferocious energy, and Jaedong starting the wrong direction, by the way. Jaedong coming back with ferocious energy in that series and utterly crushed Fantasy 3-0. And it was like pro versus amateur hour. Fantasy was made to look like a complete buffoon in those 3 games. Absolutely a dominating play. And Jaedong, he has the mental fortitude to go toe-to-toe with anybody. But Fantasy, interesting to note that recently he was demoted briefly to the B team for special training. Jaedong going for the overpool, apparently. This might actually be a 12 pool. I believe it was an overpool, though. That seems more correct. Anyway, Fantasy was demoted briefly to the B team for special training. I don't actually think. And is Fantasy going for 14cc? If he's going, oh, this could be an absolute disaster. I don't want to see this ending Flash versus Jaedong 14cc fashion. What is this SEV going to do? It's going for 14cc. Oh no! This is going to be a complete disaster. The only possible advantage that Fantasy has is that Jaedong has scouted wrong with his Overlord, but they are not in cross-map position, and Jaedong has sent his drone to scout in the correct direction. Jaedong put down a hat trick as his natural. Jaedong surely going to morph links when he sees this 14cc. Absolute insanity coming from both players. Oh no, that's not true. Only insanity coming from Fantasy. He's trying to channel Flash here. Fantasy's no Flash. He is more of a SKT1. Well, V is on SKT1. I still think Fantasy channels more the spirit of Boxer. And now he's desperately trying to put up his barracks. He's sent SEV out to deal with his drones now. He knows that Jaedong knows what's going on, and Fantasy knows that he is in desperate trouble here. If Jaedong went for a 9 pool, which Fantasy has no way of knowing, he has to assume the worst. Otherwise, this match will be over. 9 pool will get the Zerglings out faster, but an overpool close enough. Zerglings are already on the way, and I am not even sure that Fantasy will be able to finish his hatchery. But those Zerglings, distracted by the SEV a bit in the middle, could those few seconds be the time that Fantasy needs? No, it's too late. That command center still being built, and so much for the matchup of the entire series. That SEV building the command center, getting taken out. Fantasy forced to pro pretty much every single SEV he has left mining to deal with these Zerglings. Jaedong picking off 2 SEVs again there, and even Fantasy somehow survives this. He is going to be too crippled to continue. I think Fantasy, he took a massive gamble. It didn't pay off. He lost pretty much all his SEVs. So much for the match of the series. Build order win by Jaedong. Jaedong looking calm there. A win's a win. Doesn't matter. If Fantasy opts to go for the 14cc and he is fighting against Overpool, he deserves to be punished. Fantasy forced to cancel his command center. He has survived for now with Marines and his SEVs on top of his ramp, but it hardly matters. Fantasy's economy is completely wrecked. In fact, Jaedong might even be able to break up the ramp and kill these 2 Marines. It looks like they are actually almost able to finish off the Marines, but new ones popping out, stopping Jaedong. Jaedong has done the damage he needs to. Fantasy is going to stay in this game because he has pride, and those fans are undoubtedly Jaedong fans. Jaedong already has his 3rd hatchery up, I believe, at this point. There is okay, he's morphing his 3rd hatchery, but it doesn't matter. Jaedong can comfortably defend any sort of foray Fantasy might choose to send out. He's got Overlords in position just to spot. He's also being very careful. He's put down a creep colony in case Fantasy goes for some sort of awing attack. And I do not see how Fantasy could come back in this game, not against Jaedong. Even against a crappy Zerg player, there wouldn't be any chance of him coming back. Fantasy sending his Marines to the east, the 1 o'clock position. He even doesn't even know where Jaedong is. This is embarrassing to the extreme. If Jaedong had morphed another few Zerglings that Jaedong has, he's going to be able to run into the main of Fantasy and cause more havoc. Oh, Fantasy. I mean, I guess he took the gamble on the 50-50 chance, but what can he do? At this point, those 4 Zerglings able to kill another Marine caught on the ramp there, and Jaedong going to send his Zerglings to do what damage to finish off the remainder of Fantasy's SCVs, and I don't think there's anything Fantasy can do about this. Fantasy with his Marines ambling slowly towards Jaedong's base, only 1 SCV with 5 health left, and Jaedong spares the SCV. I think he might have just specifically chosen to spare the SCV so as to humiliate Fantasy further. Fantasy GG's. Somewhat disappointing, I have to say. Build order win by Jaedong. But, win's a win. Going on to the next game.